Welcome back. The former Chief Executive Officer of the South African Human Rights Commission has expressed mixed feelings about the resignation of former President Jacob Zuma and the installation of President Cyril Ramaphosa as his replacement. In conversation with our U.S. correspondent Bryce-Pease in New York, Kayum Ahmed praised the mobilization of the country's civil society groupings in Zuma's demise, but he cautioned that while the Ramaphosa era was likely to bring political and economic stability, it was unlikely to benefit everyone.
Lots of mixed feelings toward the recalling of President Zuma and the installation of President Ramaphosa. I think on the one hand, the recalling of President Zuma is a huge victory for civil society organizations, for individuals in South Africa who've been calling for his removal. And I do think that it's a signaling shift of the importance of social movements and student movements that have all arisen during the Zuma presidency. But on the other hand, I think that Ramaphosa's installation as the new president, which will certainly bring a level of political stability and economic stability, will probably most likely benefit wealthy white South Africans, big corporations, international financial institutions. So I think it's a bit of a paradoxical moment for us, sort of a bittersweet moment. I think that while we can, as citizens, breathe a sigh of relief that Zuma is gone, at the same time, we cannot stop ensuring that we hold the government and the ANC in particular accountable.
The ANC members would certainly respond to that by saying, well, you know, whoever the leader of the ANC is or South Africa is, they have to implement the policies that were adopted at the policy conference in December last year. What do you make of that in response to what you've just said?
Well, I think that the policy conference is certainly one dimension of deciding on the framework and the parameters within which South Africa operates. But I do think that even policy conferences in the past, which have taken very strong positions on issues, have fluctuated, particularly on the land issue, for instance. So while strong decisions have been taken in the past, I do think that there's movement and room for maneuver. Having said that, I'm not sure that there's going to be any radical shifts in policy with the Ramaphosa presidency. There may be some tweaks. I think South Africa's international reputation will certainly be enhanced as a result of Ramaphosa's presidency, but I'm not entirely sure that we're going to see a radical shift that we often expect with changes in leadership.
What were your thoughts on what actually happened over the last 2 weeks in South Africa? The slow-moving train of removing Jacob Zuma as president of the country, and what's your sense of how the ANC managed that process?
I think that the ANC's struggle with this particular issue, of course, it's not the first time with the removal of President Thabo Mbeki. There were similar tensions and frictions. But I do think that the ANC, at the end of the day, will probably benefit significantly from this in the next 2019 elections because they recognize that this was a politically strategic move for them. I think the handling of the matter, of course, is always going to be up for critique, and one needs to acknowledge that. But at the end of the day, they took the hard decision for their own self-preservation, of course, but it was also, I think, as a result of intense political scrutiny, civic action and individual action on the part of ordinary South Africans, and we should never lose sight of that.
How would you characterize the current relationship between South Africa and the United States? We have a new administration here, a number of key appointments in the State Department, the embassy in South Africa have not been made. What's your sense of the Ramaphosa-Trump relationship moving forward?
Well, Trump is often someone that is completely unpredictable, and it's hard to say how he's going to respond to the Ramaphosa presidency. I do think that, strangely enough, there are some parallels in the sense that Trump is also a businessman and has, as a result of his presidency, had a huge impact on the stock markets. Of course, there have been recent corrections, and potentially Ramaphosa and Trump may have some things in common. Weirdly enough. But at the same time, I do think that the political tension between South Africa and the US, which has been a long-standing one dating back to apartheid, is certainly one that's not necessarily going to be resolved as a result of the Ramaphosa presidency. I think that Ramaphosa may be much more astute diplomatically speaking and politically speaking, and be able to navigate around the Trump presidency far better than Zuma could, but I'm not necessarily sure it's going to change the relationship between the two countries.
Final question for you. What's the most important agenda item for the new president? People are talking about, cabinet changes. What really needs to happen for him to send a message, not only to South Africans, but the international community, that this is a new leadership and they will be doing things differently?
I think often we talk about economic change, political change, and the reputation, international reputation of South Africa. But I do think that the folks that need the strongest amount of support are the poorest and the marginalized South Africans. And so the biggest item on the agenda for Ramaphosa needs to be to shift the discourse on socioeconomic rights, particularly on constitutional rights in South Africa for the poorest and the marginalized. And I know it's a hard thing to do, but certainly one that is possible within the ambit of the presidency and within the ANC policies that are in place at the moment.
Kayum Ahmed, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks again.
Kayum Ahmed is a doctoral fellow at Columbia University here in New York and, of course, the former CEO of South Africa's Human Rights Commission.